CGTN, China Global Television Network. Live from London, this is The World Today.
Hello, I'm Jamie Owen. Welcome to the programme. Our top stories. China and the European Union agreed to work together to try to stabilise supply chains and oppose decoupling. Our other headlines: Turkey's president visits Azerbaijan just as thousands of ethnic Armenians flee the breakaway region of Nagorno-Karabakh. President Macron withdraws the French ambassador and troops from Niger and ends military cooperation following the coup in July. And is a Hollywood happy ending in sight? Writers agree a tentative deal to end strike action, although the actors are still on the picket line. China and the European Union have agreed to work together to try to stabilise supply chains and oppose decoupling. The announcement follows talks in Beijing between China's Vice Premier, He Lifeng, and the EU's trade chief, Valdis Dombrovskis. Dombrovskis told He Lifeng that EU companies operating in China were concerned about a growing number of issues surrounding their business environment. CGTN's correspondent Yang Chengxi reports.
The China-EU high-level economic and trade dialogue resuming face-to-face after a 3-year hiatus is seen as a positive development. Two sides discuss issues from World Trade Organization reforms, strengthening supply chain cooperation, to enhancing dialogues in intellectual property rights.
Both parties promised to maintain mutual openness and provide a fair and enabling business environment for enterprises from each other.
We therefore agreed to resume regular exchanges to discuss macroeconomic issues, reigniting the economic and financial dialogue and macroeconomic dialogue.
The issue of trade barriers was widely expected to be front and center. During his visit to China, Dombrovskis expressed the EU's concern about the issue of trade imbalances. According to data from China's Ministry of Commerce, the trade deficit of 27 EU countries with China in 2022 came close to 400 billion euros. Another sign of the complexity in China-EU trade relations is that the EU announced earlier this month of an anti-subsidy investigation into Chinese electric vehicles.
China once again expresses deep concern and strong dissatisfaction regarding the EU's initiation of an anti-subsidy investigation against Chinese electric vehicles. China hopes that all parties involved would exercise caution, continue to maintain a market that is free and open, which would benefit European consumers, promote green and low-carbon development in Europe, and contribute to global climate change cooperation.
Maintaining a healthy trade and investment relationship between China and the EU is crucial. In 2022, both sides are each other's second biggest trading partners. Yang Chengxi, CGTN, Beijing.
Adam Dunnett is the Secretary General of the European Union Chamber of Commerce in China. He spoke to Paul Barber about the EU's key demands in talks with Beijing.
Well, I think for those back in Europe, a big issue is the trade deficit. The ambassador here called it the world's largest historical trade deficit ever. It's amounting to nearly 400 billion euros last year. It's on the Chinese side, this is show that China is exporting twice as much to the EU as the EU is sending towards China. And on the European statistics side, it's nearly 3 times that amount. It's the exports from China to the EU have just grown colossally in the last 2 years, approximately 20% and 30% growth in 2001 and 2002, whereas last year EU exports to China only grew by 3%. So obviously that's a very, very obvious eyesore. The EU's got one of the lowest trade tariff markets in the world, approximately 3% and a bit on average, whereas China is still at about 5 and a bit percent. So there's obviously things that can be done on the Chinese side to lower tariffs, to bring in more European goods and services here. But it's not just the tariffs; it's actual access to the market itself, and being able to bring goods in and being able to invest here in the same way that Chinese companies are able to invest in Europe. I think a big cause of concern is in the past we knew that the Chinese market was developing and it wasn't quite as open as Europe, but it would get there eventually. I think from the view from a lot of Europeans is China's there now. China's, the world's largest exporter. It's got a GDP per capita that's higher than a number of European member states. And Chinese companies now are investing more in Europe than we're investing in China. So I think the feeling is really now is the time for the level playing field to appear like we've been asking for a long time now already.
Mm-hmm. And both sides are saying that they will work together to stabilise supply chains and to oppose decoupling. Do you think that both sides are really united on that, and it's something that they can find common ground on, and what kind of practical steps can they take to avoid those things?
Yeah, I think they would be wise to do so. I mean, I think everyone can understand with COVID and with the Russian invasion in Ukraine, the concern on the European side about supply chain resilience. But as we've seen in a number of reports and coming out of the Commission itself as well, the restrictions that we're looking at to ensure the supply chain within European for critical areas is really, really limited to a select number of products. So I think it's dangerous for us to make this a full-blown case of being much more, detrimental to trade than it actually is. I think this is a part of just a jigging of what already was some very, very strong global supply chain networks.
And if we could talk about the issue over electric vehicles, Chinese electric vehicle exports into Europe and this probe into that, and whether there is unfair advantage for Chinese companies from subsidies. The Chinese say that this is not the case, and they are expressing their concern over this probe. I mean, is this quite an unhelpful time for this to be looming on the horizon?
I mean, Chinese exports, e-vehicle exports are making a very strong impact around the world globally. We have a WTO trading system that China is a proud member of, and so that system allows for the use of subsidies in certain instances, and it also has some very clear rules on where it's seen as an abusive market or having a damaging impact on markets. So this is only an investigation at this point, and I think we should let it run its course like the processes are intended to do, and we shouldn't jump to any conclusions quite so quickly. The issue of subsidies is a matter of concern for chamber members here. China does use subsidies in a number of areas, and it's used them to great effect. We've seen that happen before. But for us, the most important thing is if and when these subsidies are being used, is that they're being used on a basis where people have equal access to them, and it's done so in a transparent manner, and again, in a way that doesn't disrupt markets in a detrimental way.
Turkey's President Erdogan is in Azerbaijan for talks with his ally, Azerbaijan's president. The visit comes as thousands of ethnic Armenians flee their homes in Nagorno-Karabakh. On Tuesday, Baku launched a military operation to take back control of the contested region. 200 ethnic Armenians and several Azerbaijani soldiers were killed in the conflict. CGTN's correspondent Louise Greenwood has been following the story. Louise, what more do we know about this trip by President Erdogan?
Well, Jamie, Erdogan not only visiting the Azerbaijani president Ilham Aliyev, he's doing so in the Azeri southern enclave of Nakhchivan, which is close to the Iranian and Turkish border to the south. Now, this region was the scene of the mass killing of mostly Azerbaijani civilians in the first war over Nagorno-Karabakh back in the early 90s. Armenia has always claimed the region as its own. So this is, again, a clear political sign from Erdogan of his country's ongoing support for Baku. He's in Nakhchivan to open a military installation, Turkey is so far being the only country to openly back Azerbaijan in its campaign in Nagorno-Karabakh. Baku has called this, of course, a counter-terrorism operation. Now, last week, Erdogan gave a speech at the United Nations General Assembly in New York. He again described his country's relationship with Azerbaijan as being one nation, two states. And he said Ankara will never accept anything other than Azerbaijan's sovereignty over Nagorno-Karabakh. So a clear message. We can expect more of the same today.
What's the latest on the ground?
Well, we're seeing the continuation of the scenes that began on Sunday. People massing at the border crossing at Lachin. Of course, it was the closure of the Lachin corridor last December that led to the collapse of aid and essential food and medical supplies to ethnic Armenians on the ground in Nagorno-Karabakh. That's led to this deterioration in living conditions there. Now, as of Monday, it's estimated that around 3,000 people have crossed the border so far. Now, that's from a region that's home to an estimated 120,000 ethnic Armenians. And really, we're seeing quite desperate scenes at the border. Cars, buses, lorries, even tractors piled high with people's possessions, all desperate to get out of the region. Now, what's happening in Yerevan itself? Well, the angry protests over the events in Nagorno-Karabakh that we saw at the weekend are continuing. There's been 140 arrests so far. Armenia's Prime Minister Nikol Pashinyan has, of course, come under heavy criticism for his handling of this crisis. He's been defending his role, and he's again accused those around the leadership in the breakaway enclave of contributing to the unrest. He's talked several times about a proxy war, and he said that the Armenians of Nagorno-Karabakh are facing what he called ethnic cleansing from their historic lands. But to the anger of many Armenians around him, Pashinyan has also stopped short of directly blaming Russia for the defeat of Nagorno-Karabakh by Azerbaijan last week. Now, in Moscow, Dmitry Peskov, the Kremlin spokesman, has said that Russia categorically disagrees that it holds any responsibility for the violence that we're seeing. He's pointed out that there are over 2,000 Russian peacekeepers on the ground. 6 of them were killed in the violence last week, and he said clearly that Armenia remains Russia's ally. Now, Azerbaijan, for its part, has said that the Karabakh Armenians can continue to live peacefully in the region if they're willing to lay down their weapons and accept being governed as part of the country from Baku. Now, clearly, many don't believe those assurances, not after the bloodshed of recent days, and again, more and more people massing on the border as we go into the week.
OK, Louise, thank you for that. Our correspondent, Louise Greenwood. President Macron says France is withdrawing its Niger ambassador and will end all military cooperation with the troops leaving by the end of the year. This follows a military coup in July that saw President Bazoum taken into detention as military leaders installed a new prime minister. France initially resisted requests for its ambassador and troops to leave, despite pro-coup demonstrations. French troops have been stationed in its former colony to help fight Islamic militants. Well, let's talk now to Professor Nick Westcott, who served as the UK's ambassador to Niger. Professor, good to have your company. Thanks very much for coming on the programme. How significant is this move?
It's significant because both President Macron and the junta were trying to make a point. Macron, that the junta was not legitimate. They were going to remain faithful to the legitimate President Bazoum, and the junta were trying to make the point that they were in control. At this stage, having not succeeded in restoring Bazoum to power, a French withdrawal became effectively inevitable, given that this had now become an issue and the junta had to prove its point that it was in control, and France was not willing to concede that they would recognize the junta.
The military junta in Niger welcoming France's decision to withdraw its ambassador. What does that suggest about the junta's intentions and perhaps its position towards the international community?
I think the junta was a bit surprised by the speed and determination of the response from ECOWAS, its neighbours, and the African Union and the international community. Rejecting the coup, and this frightened them, and therefore they have been pushed more into a corner to justify their actions and seek some form of international support for it. The only legitimacy they can find is to take an anti-French, anti-imperialist line, saying that Bazoum's government was not really legitimate, even though it had been elected by the people, because it was a puppet of the French, and therefore they are saving the nation from foreign interference. This is really the only way they can try and secure legitimacy for what they've done, which was otherwise a completely illegitimate removal of what had been a democratically elected government. So they are double downing on that line, that they are defending the nation against outside forces. And therefore, they have allied very closely now with the other junta-led countries of the region, Mali and Burkina Faso, who are in similar situation. And that is not a good situation either for ECOWAS, the African Union, nor really for the international community, except those who are interested in promoting an unstable Africa, more disorder.
I was going to ask you, how might French withdrawal change the security situation in the region, and what does this mean for the political situation in Niger?
I think we'll see in Niger, as we have already seen in Burkina Faso and Mali, that a coup leads to a deterioration in the security situation, not an improvement. Obviously, they claim one of the reasons for all three coups has been, the continuing struggle against the jihadists, the failure of civilian governments to deal with the security situation. But the facts show that in each of those countries, the situation has got worse, not better, since the military took over. And even where they've brought in foreign support in the form of the Wagner Group in Mali, still the situation is getting worse there. So I anticipate that there will be greater instability in the Sahel. This suits, in particular, Russia very well, for whom the more disorder there is in Africa, the better. But for the rest of the international community and for the neighboring African countries, this is a bit of a disaster, because you're having a whole region now from Mali through Burkina Faso, Niger, into Sudan and onto Ethiopia, that is deeply unstable, where development efforts are at a full stop, more or less, and people are beginning to flee the region because it's not safe to remain.
Nick Westcott, good to see you. Thank you very much for your analysis. Professor Nick Westcott, who served as the UK's ambassador to Niger. You're watching CGTN. Still ahead, a cliffhanger in a roller coaster drama. Hollywood's striking writers reach a tentative deal that could end one of the longest walkouts in show business.
Ever wondered what's the difference between a bear and a bull market? Where are the cash cows? And who are the lame ducks? And what exactly are black swans? Grey rhinos? And unicorn companies? Make sense of it all with Global Business, only on CGTN.
I think it should be more global cooperation.
I would like to hear more the voice of the developing countries.
Globalization has lifted more than 1 billion people out of poverty.
The green transition has to happen. It's a necessity.
Well, China and the United States are important powers in the world.
What unites us is much more than what divides us.
And I believe China is committed to this agenda.
Join me, Juliet Mann, to set the agenda at these times every weekend on CGTN.
Hello, welcome back. A reminder of our top stories. China and the European Union agreed to try to work together to stabilize supply chains and oppose decoupling. Our other headlines: Turkey's president visits Azerbaijan just as thousands of ethnic Armenians flee the breakaway region of Nagorno-Karabakh. And President Macron withdraws the French ambassador and troops from Niger and ends military cooperation following the coup in July. Hollywood's Writers' Union has reached a tentative agreement with the studios. The 3-year contract must get the approval of union members and the leadership of the Writers Guild of America, which represents nearly 12,000 writers. 5 months of strikes have put a stop to most film and television productions, costing the California economy billions of dollars. It's been the longest strike in decades in the business. Well, let's talk now to our showbiz correspondent, John Terrett in New York. Peace in our time. We've got an agreement.
Oh, I am Mr. Show Business. There's no question about that. You're absolutely right. Spot on. Look, you know, when I woke up this morning and the London news desk told me that this deal was tentatively out there, my heart was lifted, my spirits were lifted. And I'll tell you why. Because, you know, I don't know whether Hollywood is the biggest of all the exporters that America has. Probably not. But boy, is it one of the most influential. It's the same with Bollywood in Mumbai and Nollywood in Nigeria. You know, the impact of these films that they make going around the world on the sort of, you know, view that people have of the country that makes them is just absolutely, you can't make it up, you know, you can't buy it, really, in terms of money. And so now we have a tentative agreement, and I ask you to bear that word in mind, Jamie, tentative. So far, this strike has cost somewhere between $4 and $5 billion, and if they hadn't got to this agreement, it would have gone much higher than that. The Writers Guild of America says they've made exceptional gains. We were tipped off last Thursday that this was going to happen, and it didn't happen. So they obviously went on talking throughout the weekend until late on Sunday night. The deal includes obviously pay, royalties, which is what you get when one of your programs is repeated, and obviously AI as well, artificial intelligence. So I don't know the terms of the details of the agreement yet, but obviously those 3 things are included. Writers Guild of America now seeking a 3-year contract, but you must remember it is yet to be ratified by the members. Now, normally what happens with these things, as you know, if the union bosses are happy with it, then the members will fall into line, but we don't know for certain. And then finally, what about the SAG-AFTRA side of this, the actors' dispute, which is still going on? Now, technically, this was a completely separate dispute with the bosses in the Hollywood studios, but I do think there was an element of sympathy with the writers. It's the first time that they came out together since the 1960s. There are no SAG-AFTRA talks planned. That's the Actors Union. And finally, I think of the 2 of them, the more crippling is the Writers Guild of America. So if they can sort this out, that will be a good thing. And the reason for that is all movies and many television programs require their members. And it means that a lot of comedy programs and late-night talk shows can come back on stream. Jamie?
John, good to see you. Thanks for that. Our correspondent, John Terrett in New York. Greece is an important country in China's Belt and Road International Infrastructure Plan, and the projects in the country aren't just about trade. CGTN's correspondent Emma Keeling visited a China-run solar plant in northern Greece.
So you started as a security guard, and now what? Are you like the boss? You're running the place?
Όχι ακριβώς αφεντικό. Ξεκίνησα ως φύλακας πριν περίπου 10 χρόνια για το λόγο ότι το 2009 και το 2008 λόγω της οικονομικής κρίσης σταμάτησε η οικοδομή. Ο εργασιακός τομέας έπεσε πάρα πολύ χαμηλά και αναγκάστηκα να κάνω ανακατεύθυνση στον επαγγελματικό μου τομέα με αποτέλεσμα να επιλέξω τη δουλειά του φύλακα γιατί ήταν ένας ουσιαστικός παράγοντας γιατί μου άρεσε η ασφάλεια.
When I met Kostas's bosses, they told me why they were so impressed with him. They promoted him from security guard to running the whole site.
He showed from the beginning that he's a person of absolute trust. You could see that he gave his best in this station, even from the position of security guard.
To have a local man you trust while you're all the way down in Athens must be fantastic.
It is fantastic because Kostas, for us, is our eyes in the area. We are sure that everything happens. He's our first level support here. Everything that happens, he communicates directly with us. We coordinate how we react in each situation, but Kostas is the person here that will communicate with the local subcontractors, with the municipality, If we need some authorization to do something, Kostas is the person who will make the first level approach.
This part of Greece is stunning and gets 300 days of sunshine a year. But setting up a renewable energy plant is obviously about far more than just the local climate.
Why does CTG want to invest in Greece?
Because both of these countries, Greece and China, is the country with ancient celebration in the world. And the bilateral relationship is very stable, and the people of these two countries are very friendly to each other.
Why did you build the solar plant here in Nausa?
Because Nausa government give us a lot of supportment, such as land and road construction, such as the transmission line construction, and we find some more opportunity to expand our plant in future.
If the Greeks have been as hospitable to the Chinese as Kostas's family were to us, you can see the attraction. But the appreciation's clearly mutual.
So has the job, do you think your dad's job, has it helped your family?
Of course.
Yeah.
Of course.
Yeah.
Είμαι ιδιαίτερα χαρούμενος και περήφανος που εργάζομαι σαν ηλεκτρολόγος ειδικά σε αυτή τη θέση, την οποία θέση έχω και τη θέση της υποπτείας των σταθμών, και εκτελώ τη δουλειά με αξιοζήλευτο ζήλο προς τους υπόλοιπους συναδέλφους των εταιριών των οποίων έρχονται στους σταθμούς. Μας βοήθησε πάρα πολύ, άλλαξε όλη η ζωή μας. Πρώτα απ' όλα ο βιοπορισμός μας μπήκε σε μια πολύ καλύτερη μοίρα, να το πω έτσι. Τα χρήματα ήταν πολύ καλά, το ωράριο εργασίας επίσης πάρα πολύ βολικό.
That report is part of our documentary, The Green Silk Road, Connecting Europe's Renewable Grid, CGTN Europe's website or our YouTube channel to watch the full story. The Asian Games in Hangzhou are underway with basketball, gymnastics and rugby in play today. Medals are already being won, with host China currently on top, followed by South Korea. Let's talk to our correspondent there, Omar Khan. Omar, what are the highlights from today so far?
Well, Jamie, China has come out flying out of the gates here at the Asian Games. Just a quick rundown of the medal standings. They currently have 39 golds and a total of 69 medals. That's more than double than those two countries you mentioned, the ROK and Japan. So a sizable lead for China. You could say that was quite expected going into these Asian Games. Now, some of the events that took place here today, you had the cycling mountain bike event. That's just a one-day event, a women's event and a men's event. China picking up 4 medals in total in that discipline. Now, you go over to rowing. There were 7 medal finals within this discipline, China finding the podium in all of those. But I would say the big day for the Chinese national team was over in skateboarding and sport. I've been following closely here at the Games. The women's park event, that wrapped up today. You had 2 skaters, Li Yujuan and Mao Jiasi, claiming bronze and silver. They shared their emotions and excitement after claiming those medals. They're off to Rome, Italy, to continue on their skateboarding circuit, I should say. Then Chen Ye, a 15-year-old from Guangdong province, secured the gold medal in the men's skate park final. That is the first for a Chinese skateboarder in any major world championship. That includes Asian Games, the World Skateboarding Championship, and the Olympics. We rounded out the night speaking with some of the men's basketball players. We had Zhao Ziwei looking ahead to the tournament. Again, Team China's basketball team looking to come off a tough World Cup in the Philippines. Jamie?
Omar, thank you for that. Our correspondent, Omar Khan. And that is The World Today. Thank you for watching. We're back with more news at the top of this hour. Coming up next, it's World Insight. For now, from all of the team in London, it's goodbye.